Okay, so I think we got to about we were talking about this chart in the last discussion, and then I think we were talking about how the Prophet Muhammad SAW, we spoke about this part. Is that correct? Yeah, the hadith. Yeah.
The last thing I have is about the self-constructor.
Yeah, which is here.
Yeah.
So it's yeah. So it's just really this idea that the child is the one doing the work, and it's Allah the one who's given him the mechanisms, and giving him the blueprint, and given him the environment and everything that he needs so that the child can construct themselves into a human being. And I think that element of the child is someone that needs to construct, because we're a spiritual being in a physical body. So you have to construct your physical part and how you your body, the movement of your body, your coordination and everything. But we also have to construct how we socialize. So the young child is basically building these human characteristics. That's how I like to refer to them. So the human characteristics are like how to socialize, how to be part of a group, how to talk, how to move, culture, developing their culture. And of course, for us as Muslims, our culture, it's not just about where we're from, but our culture has to be and should be infused with the prophetic model. So the Prophet Muhammad SAW is the perfect example of how to eat and how to talk and how to interact and how to, so everything the child should take from culture, it should be about their, where they're from, but also with the Prophet Muhammad SAW as the example. So that's really what this young child is trying to do. They're trying to construct their human characteristics so that they can be a fully functioning adult. So what do we know about this first plane child? So we know that they are a sensory explorer. They're using their senses to explore everything that's in their surroundings. And we did talk about this earlier, that, their surroundings at the beginning, at least the first year or so, is just their home and their immediate family. But then over time, their surrounding becomes bigger. So, the child is a little bit older, will start to go to preschool, will start to go to our play groups. And now what you've created at Ummah Jameela is like the next layer above the layer of the family. So they're using all of their senses to explore everything that they see around them in the universe so that they can construct their human characteristics. Okay. Another really important task that the child is doing during this period is they're adapting to their environment. This is one of the unique things about human beings. Human beings, they have to construct their human character adapted to the time and the place that they're in. So the child of 2023 has to adapt themselves to this modern time that we're living. They cannot build their character according to 1923, 100 years ago. They have to be of the current age, right? So this is one of the gifts that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us, is that we're always building generation over generation. We're building our character and humanness according to the time that we're living in. Okay, this is one of the miracles. Actually, it's the way I see it. It's like a miracle, because if you take a cat, the cat is going to be a cat. And if you took a cat from 200 years ago and a cat today, they're going to pretty much have almost the same characteristics and the same, interactions and everything, especially if you have like a pure breed. Like I told you, I breed British Shorthairs. So if you take a British Shorthair from 200 years ago and a British Shorthair from now, they're pretty much going to be almost identical in the way that they are and their personality. But for human beings, each generation brings this new life, this new fruit, this new opportunity. And the child will adapt to the current times that they're in so that they can take things to the next point and the next level. Okay? Because the human being is always supposed to be somebody who's building on what came before. Okay, the Prophet Muhammad SAW told us that knowledge is the lost property of the believer. So we're always supposed to be taking that knowledge and that understanding that has come from the people before us and then building on it, taking it one step further. And the child is doing that from the first 6 years of life. They're adapting to the environment and the time that they're in, so that they can construct a current human being who's mastered what has happened from the past and can now move humanity forward in a beautiful way. Another thing that a child is trying to do is they're seeking functional and physical independence. So if you think about it as the human being is a soul or a ruh, a spirit, put into this physical body, one of the first things that the human being will need is to master that physical body, to master the physical body so that we can use it efficiently and effectively. You know, the child is seeking that physical independence. They don't want you to do things for them. They want to do things for themselves. That's the fitra. The fitra of the child is that they want to do things for themselves because they want to know, how do you do it? But of course, I know, like, many people will say that their children don't want to put their shoes on, their children don't want to feed themselves, their children, that's actually something that happens if the child is not given the opportunity to be independent at the right stage of their life. So if you look at a toddler, for example, I mean, in this video, this boy he wasn't 2 yet. And I remember when I was observing him, he just wanted to do everything, right? If his mom doesn't give him the opportunity to try things out for himself and break things down into manageable and achievable steps, then what will happen is this little boy, after a few months or so, he will stop trying. So when you get those 3 or 4 year olds who don't want to do things for themselves and they want everything done for them, when you get those 3 or 4 year olds, most likely it's because at this young stage, when they're trying to do everything, they were stopped. They were prevented from doing that. So then it took them away from that fitra. But the fitra of the human being is they want to be independent, because the human being by nature is not just somebody who wants to serve themselves, but it's somebody who wants to serve others. If you look at the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and his example, he was the example of somebody who serves others, lived his life in service for others. So the human being, the fitra of the human being is that they want to be able to look after themselves so that now they can serve others. And you see this preschool child, this child from 0 to 6 years, you see them go at great lengths to try and perfect their movement, to try and perfect their ability to do things for themselves, whether it's to set up a snack or to put on their shoes or to cook something or even shower themselves or brush their own teeth. We see them go at great lengths because they have this drive to reach functional independence. And then when they have that functional independence, you see that they search for opportunities to do things for others. For example, feed the cat or help you put the dishes away, right? But to do all of those physical things, the child has to develop their movement first. And that's why in Montessori, we have the practical life area, which you've gone through the videos already. And in the practical life area, you'll see there's all these activities that help children to develop their fine motor skills, develop their coordination, and develop the actual physical skills, such as pouring or spooning or threading. So we're giving them this opportunity because they're seeking physical independence. We're giving them this opportunity to build a physical independence, right? And then once the child builds it and they can look after themselves, you will see that they will strive to look after each other. I was with some children the other day, my niece and a little boy, and it was the cutest thing ever. This little boy was eating noodles, and then he's a little bit older than my niece, and he wanted my niece to try it. And the way that he really carefully, put this noodle, this really wobbly noodle on this spoon, and he put just enough little soup, and then he gave it to my niece and was fed her so that she can try it. And I was looking and I was watching and I was thinking that, the fitra of the children is they don't just care about themselves, actually. This 0 to 6 stage, a lot of it is about self-development, but it's self-development to be able to serve others. It's self-development to be able to help others, So he took all of those skills that he learned and then he developed in himself not just about feeding himself, but now he's feeding someone else. And the beautiful expression and the energy that he had because he'd accomplished being of service. So that's what, this is what this small child in the first plane of development is doing. And the child is gifted in order to achieve language development, movement. He's gifted with the absorbent mind. Okay, we had a video on the platform about the absorbent mind. So I hope that you've watched that. I'll link it in anyway in the group so that you can have a read of that. But Allah gifted the child with this absorbent mind that doesn't filter. So it absorbs every single thing in the child's environment effortlessly. And it doesn't filter or discriminate against anything. Dr. Montessori uses the example of a photographer and a painter. She says, if you have a painter paint a picture, they will decide what they want to include in the picture and what they don't want to include or what they want to change. That's like the mind of an adult. If we're in an environment, we have a control or choice over what we will take in and what we don't take in. But the mind of the child is like a photographer. It just snaps that moment completely with everything included within it. So the child's mind is absorbing everything without discrimination. And it never stops absorbing. It's absorbing constantly, right? Even, the moment they wake up, the moment they go to sleep, it's always absorbing everything that's around them. And that's why it's so important for us to be really careful and conscious about what is happening in the environment of this young child, especially the 0 to 3 child, because everything is being taken in. If we look at the recent studies of neuroscience, we'll see that they actually show that whatever we've absorbed in the first 3 years of our life, it becomes part of our subconscious mind. And the majority of adults, they are operating from their subconscious mind. Because when, many adults are not operating in that higher level of consciousness. So we're actually operating from our subconscious mind. And if we're operating from our subconscious mind, it means whatever we've absorbed between 0 to 3 is the program that's running us on our daily life. So for example, if the child is exposed to, let's say, frustration and anger, in many cases, an adult who is not operating from consciousness may display that frustration and anger that they absorbed when they were a child. Okay, if the child was absorbing Tawheed, if they were absorbing Quran, if they were absorbing the love of prayer, if they were absorbing a parent who's really connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then as an adult, that subconscious of the child will fall back on that. Will fall back on that religious expression that they absorbed from their parents when they were young. So it's really, really, really important for the children to have the right environment to absorb. Dr. Montessori says adults admire the environment, they can remember it and think about it, but the child absorbs it. The things he sees are not just remembered, they form part of his soul. He incarnates in himself all in the world about him that his eyes see and his ears hear. In us, the same things produce no change, but the child is transformed by them. So each of these experiences the child is having is transforming them, and it's building the adult who they are going to become. And I think, I'm sure that all of us on here, and at some point in our lives, we'll be looking to develop ourselves for self-development. We may have characteristics or traits within ourselves that we know are not positive, and we want to break those characteristics, or we want to break those traits. And often those are things that we absorbed when we were small. Often, whether we absorbed it because it was done to us or because it was done in the environment around us, often it's things like that. And I'm sure that it can be incredibly difficult to break that. incredibly difficult to break the pattern that we absorbed in our early years of life. Another thing that the child has in this stage to help them to, build their language and movement and develop their human characteristics is they have what Montessori calls sensitive periods. The sensitive periods are windows of opportunity in which learning something specific can be optimal. Okay, so Dr. Montessori talks about the sensitive periods as this power of attraction to the environment. So the child has a really strong attraction to the environment focused on certain aspects that the child needs for their development over others. Okay, these are really, really critical periods. If the child is given all they need in a sensitive period, their development, inshallah, will be optimal. But if the child is kept away from things that are needed during those sensitive periods, then the child will actually have quite a difficult time to master those things. And language is one of the opportunities, one of the easy ones to understand. So I have like a chart here of the sensitive periods. So we can see at birth, they have a sensitive period for movement, order, and speech. And, we all have, if you've had any experience with babies, which I think all of you have, you'll know that this newborn baby is really attracted to your mouth when you're talking. They look up at your mouth and they try to, move their mouths and they try to make sounds as well. And that happens from birth, right? So we know that this child is really sensitive and very, very interested in speech. Another one is order. We know that this newborn baby, routines and order are really important to aid them. If you change the routine, often it can unsettle the child. Dr. Montessori tells us that the child from 0 to 5 has this sensitivity, 0 to 4, sorry, has this sensitivity to order because they're using the external order to construct their internal order. So they need that outward order so that they're able to construct their mind, right? And if the child has not had that opportunity to be in an environment that has order and a rhythm and a schedule of the day, often we will see that they're a bit more unsettled. But another thing that we see is often they'll grow into adults who are not really well organized, or not, maybe it's outward organization as in their homes, or maybe the structure of their speech or the way they work through things may not be ordered. Sometimes they have a big difficulty with it. And sometimes, people will grow up in an environment that's not ordered, and then they will just get so fed up of it that they will force themselves to be ordered later on in life. But the idea is that they need that external order to create internal order. And everything that we do needs order, even speech needs order. Okay, the way that you construct your sentences, the words that you use, all of those need a sense of order. And then movement, of course. Movement is a really important sensitive period. And we can see that this young child from birth is constantly, trying to move and exploring with their hands, and then they're kicking their legs and trying to sit, and they're going through so much effort. I always tell myself that when you have somebody who is paralyzed, an adult who's paralyzed, and then they have to relearn to walk and relearn to feed themselves, you really see how challenging it is, right? How challenging it is to master those skills. But this newborn baby is doing it all the time, and they never complain. They just do it. It's really, really incredible. Okay, and then we also have like the sensitive period for small and tiny objects. We see that these young children are really interested in miniatures and small details and tiny things. We have the development of the senses. So first of all, they're exploring with their senses, and then later on, it's refinement of senses. Okay, they have a sensitivity to meaningful activity that you, especially when you see children around 2.5 years old, you see that they're really thirsty and eager to do meaningful work. They don't just want to play with something that doesn't have, you know, a purpose. They really want something that has meaning. They want to contribute in a way. And that ties in nicely with the physical independence, because, you know, if you look at a 2.5-year-old, they start to have this physical independence. So now they want something meaningful to do. And then grace and manners is another sensitive period, which is around the age of 2.5 to 3. We see that the children are really eager and keen to, you know, explore grace, explore manners. And if you introduce it in a way that really engages them, they become quite sensitive to implementing that and using that, and they'll question people who don't have that grace and manners. We have the sensitive period for religion. Montessori doesn't write about this one a lot, but it is in some of her books that she talks about how the child has a sensitivity to religion from 3 to 6 years. And she talks about the first 6 years of life being about the child is really sensitive to the love of God. And then the next 6 years of life is where the child is learning about religion in a more formal way. And then we have writing, reading, mathematics. And those one, if a child is in a Montessori environment and they've had all of their previous sensitivities met, then usually when they come to about the age of 3.5 to 4, you start to see this interest in reading and mathematics and writing and so on. Okay, so these sensitive periods, they're like windows of opportunity. If you catch the child in the windows of opportunity, they will be able to learn those skills really, really easily. Okay. These sensitive periods are universal to all children all over the world, but the exact timing is unique to the child. So although we put 3 to 6 years, it could happen at 3 years, it could happen at 4 years, it could happen at 4.5, it could happen at 5, 5.5, it could even happen at 6. Our role as adults is to be ready for that sensitive period when it comes, to be ready and to give an environment that provides for the sensitive periods. So even if the child has not yet entered a sensitive period and you're not seeing any sensitivity, you still want to provide an environment that is going to arouse that sensitivity and be ready for them. So for example, something like reading. We know that the child is not going to be sensitive to reading when they're newborn, but we always want to have that reading going on in the environment, that language going on in the environment, so that when that sensitivity arises, it's part of their environment and it's easy for us to observe and to notice and to see it. The way that we know when a child is in a sensitive period is through observation, because you'll see that the child will keep going back to that particular thing over and over and over again. And you'll see that they will try to engage in that thing and they will not become tired from it. Okay. There is a longer lecture about sensitive periods on the platform. And there is also the assignment about sensitive periods, observation of the environment, which Rania did. And I was saying that it'd be really, really good if you did it as a group, if you looked at these sensitive periods for children between the ages of 3 to 6, or however old the children are in your play group, and you just looked at, are you including all of them? Okay, are you including all of these different sensitive periods? Do you have a language-rich environment? Do you have opportunities, lots of opportunities for movement? Are you doing grace and manners? You know, what are you including in your environment so that the children are able to, when the sensitive period arises, they have that, everything that they need there ready for them. Okay, so you can have a look at that video. I'll link it in the WhatsApp group. But you can see that the child's got this absorbent mind, they've got these sensitive periods. These two work hand in hand. So the sensitive periods will let them focus on movement or focus on language or focus on religion. And then the absorbent mind will just absorb everything there. So when these two work together and we create an environment that facilitates for these two, the child's learning becomes really, really easy and steady. It's not a lot of effort, right? We don't even have to do a lot of effort, right? I know sometimes like teachers who work with young children, they feel like they've got to do so much work. But in this case, it's not, you know, the child, if you get them in the optimal period, their absorbent mind is going to do the work effortlessly. But it's about us being ready, observing it, and being ready with the environment for it. Okay. So what does the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ tell us about this first plane of development? He tells us that the child is born on a fitra. Every single child, no matter who they are, no matter what their background, no matter who their parents are, every single human being is born on the fitra. And this fitra is, of course, the fitra of Tawheed, so the fitra of our religion, but it's also the fitra of how to be the best possible human being. Because in the Islamic context, fitra is not just about being born on Tawheed, but it's also that we are born in this pure human state. Okay? And that fitra can remain with us until we're older, if we are in the right environment. Adults, like the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, who are very pure and who live their life in the best of ways, we can say of them that they are on their fitra. And in the Quran, it talks about Prophet Ibrahim and about the religion of the fitra of the religion. Okay, so this concept of fitra is with the child when they are born, and they can remain on the fitra as much as possible if they have the right experience and the right opportunities. We see that the child will come away from their fitra if they are constantly being pulled away to experience things that are not natural. So for example, in modern education, you know, you might have a child who's 3 years old, might go to like a play school and they're trying to teach them to read, and that child is, their fitra is pulling them to be independent, but the teachers are pulling them to read and write. So now we're disrupting the fitra, and we spoke about this already. We want to flow with the river of the fitra, not against it, because human development will be optimal in the long run if we flow with the river of fitra. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ tells us that the way to support the fitra of the child during this stage is through playing with the child. He tells us for the first 7 years of life, play with the child. And what does playing with the child mean? Playing with the child means that we approach them with anything that we want them to absorb through ways that they can play and engage with that concept. So even if it's something to do with, like, for example, the manners for sneezing, we don't want to do it formally, but we want to do it in a role play way so that they are able to engage with it through what is play to them. Okay? Dr. Montessori actually writes about play a lot. And she says that we've constructed this idea that play is just having fun and running around and just, you know, being, you know, doing whatever you want to do. But she says that if you really sit and observe children's play, for example, if you observe children playing with a doll's house, often what we see that they're playing is they're playing the adult life. So the dolls will be washing up, the dolls will be getting ready to go out, the dolls will be changing nappies, the dolls will be doing, right, you know, baking, the dolls will be having tea, the dolls will be praying. Yeah. So the child in their play, they're imitating and they're role-playing real life. Okay, this idea of play just to have fun and be careless, if we really observe children, young children, that's not what they're doing. They're not being careless. Even in their play, they're working on constructing themselves and making sense of what they've taken in from the adult world around them. So when we're talking about play with your child for 7, we're talking about this play. Excuse me 1 minute. Better drink some water. I've been talking all day long. Okay. So we're talking about this play. You know, the play that the child is, they're reacting what they've experienced in everyday life to try and make sense of it. Okay. In the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu, there's references where the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu talks to us and he tells us about how the child is, he's absorbing and imitating everything that we do. So there's the story of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu grandsons, Hassan and Hussein, right? And how they would imitate the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu, and how the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu would slow down and he would wait for them, you know. So this is all prophetic examples of how the Prophet, he was aware of that absorbent mind. He was aware of those sensitive periods, even if even if he didn't use those terms, he was aware of them. Okay. And the advice that we have from the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu is that during that first plane of development is to keep that the mother keeps the child close to them. Okay, if you look at the in Arabic, they use the word hadana, right? Yeah. So hadana, you know, the word hadana comes from an Arabic word which could mean the side of your body. Okay. So it's the idea of keeping them close, but it can also mean wing. And I don't have the exact Arabic, you know, my Arabic's terrible, but I don't have the exact reference here, but it can also mean wing, and wing of the bird. Okay. So when you think of a bird that lays eggs, what does it do with its wings? It will spread its wings out, right? And cover the eggs and keep the eggs protected. And when it has its young and the youngs hatch, the bird will sit there and it will protect them under the wing. So this concept of hadana, it's like the wing, the protection that's given by the wing of the bird. So you keep the children close to you. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala designed us that the human being, the child, needs breastfeeding. And according to the prophetic tradition, for the first 2 years of life. So in a way, the child is forced to stay close to us, right? Under our wing, you know, because that's what the child needs in this first plane of development. They need that closeness. And, you know, this just makes me really think about, you know, the important work that we have to do, not just our own work to develop ourselves and to understand the children, but also the work that we have to do with mothers. And I'm sure that in Ummah Jameela, I'm sure that you have like so many different families that come in and out from there. And, you know, mothers really, really need support to understand the fitra of their children so that they can provide that nurturing wing that supports the child in that very early stage before they come to you in your setting, in your play group. Yeah, at Rumi Montessori, we do a lot of work with mothers, and our mothers are always here. They're always in and out. We even made one room that they call mum space. So the mums will always hang out there and they'll have class and they'll have like, they'll be together and they'll go through things. So that's a really important duty that we have as well as educators, is to remember that this first stage, the child is going to spend it with their mothers, and being able to support the development of mothers so that they can be the best examples with their children. That's a really, really important duty for all of us as well, inshallah. So then we go on to the second plane of development. So I don't want to take up too much time. Should I skip this second plane and third plane? Or do you want to hear really quickly so you know where the children are heading to? Anybody? I can only see Rania. I can't actually see anyone else's. So I don't know why. I think, oh, I got to press it. Hold on a minute. Oh, there you go. Now I can see everyone else. Oh. The Zoom changed its settings, so that's why. Okay. Would you like me to quickly go over the second plane development? Jean, yes or no?
I say yes. At least it gives us some context.
Okay. Yeah, because it's really important to know where the child is heading to. So the second plane of development, Dr. Montessori calls this the intellectual period. This is the time when the child's intellectual capacity is at its highest in human life. I know we all think that we outsmart elementary age children, but in reality, the intellectual capability of a child between 6 to 12 years, it surpasses us. That's why they are capable of learning so many things effortlessly and with such enjoyment if they're given the opportunity. So the child loses their absorbent mind and they now begin to have this reasoning mind. And the reasoning mind begins to analyze everything. It begins to compare things. It begins to categorize things. So everything that they've absorbed from before, they're now analyzing everything, and they're now structuring their understanding of this world in which they live. The child also has a really powerful imagination. Okay. A lot of people think that imagination is for the younger child. But if we observe the younger child, often what they are imagining is, and role playing is to do with real life, things that they've really seen or heard or experienced. But the imagination of an elementary child, it can go beyond what they have experienced and seen. Okay? They can imagine about the planets, that it's not something concrete that they can see, you know? They can imagine about the planets. They can imagine about people in the past. They can imagine about people in the future. They can use their imagination creatively to come up with totally new concepts or new ideas. Okay? So they have this really, really powerful imagination. Different from that imagination that we see in the younger child, who is, you know, focused on real life. And yes, sometimes you'll see young children who are, you know, imagining things and they're playing out games, but that's because maybe they've been exposed to too much fantasy too early. But actually, if the child is on their fitra and they haven't been exposed to that fantasy too much, you'll actually see that the younger child's mind is really practical about everyday life. But the elementary child is another thing. Okay. And I think I've told you many times before, but I love the elementary stage because you just never know what they're going to come up with. Their imagination is incredible. So the elementary child is really, really social. In fact, it's really hard to stop them from talking. They often have so much they want to say and they want to share and they want to express, whether it's to their parents or to their teachers or to their friends, right? In fact, Dr. Montessori tells us that if we prevent this elementary child from talking, it's actually harmful for the child because their fitra is urging them and directing them to constantly be talking and sharing things. So if you enter like my elementary classroom, you'll see that the children are always talking, nonstop. We never have silence in our elementary classroom. Even the way that we teach our lessons, we engage with them and we encourage them to talk and to participate and to give their opinions. And a lot of people think that elementary children that they won't learn if they are talking all the time, right? But as adults, we need the skill, especially mums, We need the skill of being able to multitask, to do work and talk at the same time. So you might be, cooking, but you talking to your children, or you might be, listening to this lecture and at the same time you're talking to your children. We need that skill of multitasking. It's a human skill that we need. So the elementary child, they come in there and now they're using these two skills. One is to socialize in their social setting, but also be learning at the same time. So we see that they begin to learn through socialization. They always want to be together. Dr. Montessori said that they have herd instinct, which means they always want to keep together. Their mind, because it's a reasoning mind now, it's coming away from the abstract, it's coming away from concrete, and it's going more towards abstract concepts and abstract ideas. And that's why they find things like maths easier, and they're more able to do maths, and they're really interested in abstract ideas. Dr. Montessori tells us that they have this extreme interest in history. They really want to know about the heroes of the past and the men and women of the past and what they did in their life and how it contributes to what we're doing today. Okay? For us as Muslims, what we know about the elementary child is that they're really interested in, what this universe is about. They're interested in what the universe is about, what's the purpose of life, and who they are, and what their relationship is with the whole universe and the whole of humanity. So the child is really searching for their purpose in life. And Dr. Montessori, she says that we should give them something that she calls cosmic education, or the cosmic curriculum, which is basically where we present the whole world as an interconnected web of life for the child to explore. And some of you may have seen that recently I was advertising this course that we do that's called Cosmic Education from the Islamic Perspective. And in that one, that's more towards the elementary stage. And in that course, we're basically talking about how in the Islamic tradition of education, science and geography and history and all of these subjects, these would be things that the elementary children would be thriving. They would be so interested and engaged to learn about all of these subjects. Another important thing for us to understand is that the elementary child is developing what Montessori calls their moral compass, right? The child is not going to take the morals that we give them, but they're going to take the experiences and the exposure we give them, and then they're going to use all of that, even the lessons we give, to formulate their own moral compass. Okay, so they need plenty of social opportunities and opportunities where they see how we as adults, what our moral system is, how we conduct ourselves socially, because they're going to take all of that in to create their own moral compass. So this is really important because this is the development of character, the understanding of right and wrong, the understanding of how we should be, this is a really, really important stage. And then lastly, Dr. Montessori says that, the first plane child is saying, help me to do it myself. But this elementary child is saying, let me think for myself. So they want to be able to think for themselves. And that's why sometimes elementary children, if we tell them, it's like this and this and this and this, but they're like, no, but this, no, but that, but I think it's like this, but I think, they'll question us because they're gathering all this knowledge and these experiences that they have to formulate their own thinking. So it's really important they have a healthy environment that allows them to develop their thinking in the correct way, allows them to develop their character, their moral compass, use their imagination and everything in the correct way. And because they're in this intellectual period, their capability to learn intellectual knowledge, it's limitless. So we shouldn't limit them. So one of the things that we have in a Montessori environment is our curriculum is not limited only to what we have planned, but we give space for children to explore beyond that, according to their interests and their level. So that's the second plane of development, which is, you can have a look, you can see more on my Instagram if you want to know. From the prophetic angle, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ told us this is the time to teach the child. And now they're using that intellect to develop an understanding of the reality of the world and our purpose within it. And because they're developing their character, it's more about developing their Muslim character. Because the child is developing their moral compass, we want it to be the acquisition of Islamic morals. Okay? So they start to learn about fiqh and Islamic rulings, about what's right, what's wrong, and how do we live our life in the correct way, the way of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And because they have this interest in history and role models, we want to let it be the Islamic role models, the great heroes that we have from our history. Okay. And we said about they're very interested in socialization, right? And I think one of the things that I was talking to somebody about how so many Muslim organizations, they fail because people can't get along, right? I don't know if you've experienced that on your end of the world, but in England, we certainly experienced that. And, even in Malaysia, they've got the same problem, that all this Muslim organizations and things, they fail because people can't get along. Okay, they can't come together as an Ummah or a Jameela. Okay, whatever it may be for, even if it's to build a school or to build a farm or whatever it may be. This elementary period is actually it's the prime period for the child to develop all of their social characteristics, so that they can be tolerant to each other. They can see the good in each other. Everyone can understand that they can make a contribution in their own unique way, and that we value each other, we respect each other, that we support each other, that when we see something bad in one person, we know that it doesn't mean that that person's bad, but we actually see that that's a struggle that Allah has given them, and we should be grateful, firstly, that Allah has not given it to us, and then we should be supportive of them to help them overcome it. So all of these characteristics of social life, this is what takes place in the elementary stage. And I was speaking to some friends of mine, and we were saying that most people nowadays, they're elementary stage, they're in a classroom with only the same age group, and they're not allowed to talk much, and they're not allowed to engage, and you can't socialize much. You socialize in the playground, but you don't really have much time to socialize and have this healthy social environment. And so naturally, what happens then is that prime period to learn how to socialize in a healthy human way is missed, whereas if we can try and bring back that opportunity, even if it's not in a school environment, but just amongst ourselves, bring back that opportunity for the Muslim youth to really be able to socialize in a healthy environment, then inshallah that will support them later on when they become adults and they start to form their groups to do projects, whether it's to open a school or a cafe or whatever it may be, and hopefully it can help to settle things a bit better, inshallah. Yeah. So that's one of the connections that we were talking about. If you observe my elementary classroom in my school, you will see another level of humanity. I always say that these children, they put us to shame because their forgiveness and their tolerance and their support and their willingness to help and their willingness to forgive and their willingness to, it's so beautiful. And it's beautiful because it's according to their fitrah, because it's the time that their fitrah is urging them to do it. I go there sometimes to remind myself how I should be, because I see them and then I think, oh my God, what have I done? So it's really, really a beautiful stage of life. And then we have the third plane of development. That's my son, by the way. He's a man now, but that's when he was in his third plane of development. Basically, the third plane of development, the child is stepping into adulthood. Montessori likens them to a newborn baby because she says this is a period of turmoil, which we spoke about last time, right? And she said that they need that love and care and support, just like a newborn baby. But of course, it's in a different way because this is a newborn baby adult, right? It's a newborn adult. She says that they have 1 foot in childhood and 1 foot in adulthood. And that transition is really, really hard. I remember like my son, when he was little, he used to say to me, I can't wait to be an adult. I can't wait to be an adult. I can't wait to be an adult. And then when he got to his like late teens, he said to me, I wish I could be small again. You know, that transition into being an adult was like huge, you know. And a lot of children, they want it to become an adult because they want the freedom, but then when they have it, they realize how much of a blessing it is to be a child, right? So, you know, they're going through all this deep emotions. They're trying to find out who they are as an adult. They need opportunities to interact with really good adult examples, you know, so that they can find themselves and who they are, because they're not going to be like us. You know, my son is not like me, you know, he's far, far better than me, you know. I'd hope to say he's still developing certain things, but where I sometimes, you know, I might say, oh, I'm going to do this. And he's like, no, mom, that's not right. You can't do things like that. And I'm like, hold on a minute. You know, which one is the parent here? You know, they're not going to become like us because every child is a unique person. You know, they're our children, but they're not our property. They're Allah's property. And he created them and he has his plan for them. And he lent them to us when they were small so that we can do our role to nurture them. But they are very much their own person, and they're going to make their own contribution. And they will take from us, of course, some things, but in the end, they're going to be their own person. And this stage is where their child really, you know, they have to discover who's the adult that they're going to be. And how are they going to serve and contribute to human life? You know, it's a really, really delicate stage, you know. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ told us in this stage, what we have to do is befriend them. And I think this is so beautiful. He doesn't say teach them. He says befriend them. Because this adolescence child, they need you to be there by their side, but their side as a friend. They need that love and that respect as an adult, but they need you there at the same time as a friend. And they're accountable for the choices they make. Yeah. And that's quite scary for some of them to realize, hang on a minute, now I'm actually accountable now, you know? And so they need an education system before that's given them this very clear vision of life and the purpose of life and what's right and what's wrong. You know, they need to have developed all of that so that when they enter into this stage, now they can just focus on finding themselves as an adult. So they're implementing everything that they learned before. Okay, so all the morals they learned before, all the socialization they learned before, all the purpose of life and everything that they've learned, they're now implementing it. And then they have to find their way to contribute back to society, back to humanity, back to this world. Okay. And then the fourth plane of development is another calm period. And this is a period where the child is now an adult. They now fulfill their cosmic tasks. They create their own family and they contribute back to society. Okay. And that's that's the 4 planes of development. And then I have this chart here just to kind of help us to understand that, you know, each of these stages of childhood, it's a layering one upon another to build up the human being into the adult that they're going to become. So the first layer is they're developing their language, their movement, their physical independence, and they're adapting. Once they've done that and they have physical independence, now they're doing intellectual independence. Okay, because they have that physical independence. So now they're doing intellectual independence. And then the next one is they're going to do economical independence and social independence. So the human being, the way that Allah designed the human being is that we're layering like an onion, okay? And everything rests on the stage that came before. So the most important period is the first period of life. because what happens later is going to rest upon that. Okay, so those of you who are working with children in an early stage of development, you know, even though society doesn't really give so much like attention to it and value the work that we do, it's actually the most important work. And just now, the visitors who came, there were some visitors from Yemen, and they called me Ustaza Nusaiba. I was like, no way, I'm not an Ustaza. And the lady turned around and she said, the people who work with the youngest of children are the biggest of Ustazas. She said, I was like, oh, she said, the contribution that we make is huge. Don't underestimate it. And it's true, because, you know, the child is building up and they start from the first layer. And if we can support them in that first layer, then inshallah, that will aid and that will support them into growing into, inshallah, to the best that they can be. Let me just check. Okay, see, we finished one PowerPoint. So I rushed it a little bit, but I hope it's okay, so that we can try and like get through things, inshallah. Any questions? No? None from Jean? Rania, any questions? No? Hannah, any questions? Tenny, any questions? No?
Just when you said, so when they say help me to do it myself in the first plane, so the carer or the educator or the parent needs to break things down into something manageable.
Yeah.
I didn't get that.
Yeah, our role is to facilitate so that they can do it. They might not be able to do the whole task at once, but we break it down so that they can at least achieve certain bits. So like, for example, that child is going to want to put their shoes on. If we have lace-up shoes, it's going to be really challenging for them to, at the beginning, to put their shoes on by themselves. We'll have to keep doing it for them. But if we have shoes that are manageable with straps or something that they can do by themselves, then we're supporting them to achieve that themselves. And then as they become more accomplished and more independent, then we can make the shoes a bit more complicated until eventually they have laces, right?
Got it.
If you take that concept and you apply it to everything, so whatever the child really wants to do, we try and create that environment or the conditions that supports them to achieve it.
So it's connected with the prepared environment. So we actually have to always be switched on, yeah? So think in advance, okay, I have to prepare this kind of environment to make it manageable for them, whatever it is. So
yeah, so one is you can do that in advance, but if you're feeling that it's too overwhelming to do it in advance, just observe your child now. So if you're observing your child, let's say they go into the kitchen and they want water. Okay, so if you observe they want water, so just focus on that one thing. How can I make this water more accessible so my child can do it themselves without spilling, for example? You know, maybe you would have such a big bottle, maybe you'd have a smaller bottle, right? Maybe you put it lower. Okay, my advice to parents is to start with what you can do. You know, it may seem too big to do the whole prepared environment, right? Just start with little bits here and there, and then those will eventually add up to create an environment that allows your child to be independent. And some of it is really simple things like, you know, if your child, having a stool in the bathroom so that they can reach the sink and wash their hands, having their toothbrush low enough, you know, having their toothpaste, you know, if they're going to push all the toothpaste out, so then how can you still let them take toothpaste, but not, you know, not in a way that's going to, you know, waste all the toothpaste. So it's just really observing what your child is asking for right now and giving that to the children. Yeah. And a lot of the frustration that we see in 1.5 to 2 year olds is because they're not able, they want to do it, but we don't let them. Yeah, some of the most frustrated children I've seen are ones that have nannies that do everything for them. And then they'll get to about 2.5, 3, and then they'll give up. And now they just want everything done for themselves. And then they'll get upset when nobody does it, right?
Awful. Yeah, it's awful.
It's you know, you have to really be ready for that moment when you see that they're really seeking their independence. Yeah. Any other questions? No. Thank you so much. I thank you so much. Inshallah, we will continue. Let me know next week, and then we'll know about the weeks after that. Inshallah. Thank you so much. Take care, everyone. Good night.
Alaikum.
جزاك الله خير. السلام عليكم.
Thank you. Jazakallah.